Esther chapter 2, verse 1. After these things, when the wrath of King Ahasuerus was appeased, he remembered Vashti and what she had done and what was decreed against her. Then said the king's servants that ministered unto him, Let there be fair young virgins sought for the king, and let the king appoint officers in all the province of his kingdom, that they may gather together all the fair young virgins unto Shushan the palace, to the house of the women, unto the custody of Hagi. It'll be changed in a minute. That's one rendering of the name. The king's chamberlain, keeper of the women. Now, it sounds like that's a male, but you would think it would be a female. But whatever it is, chamberlain, maybe it's a eunuch. You would think it would be a chambermaid if it was female. Maybe it was a eunuch. Could be. Keeper of the women. And let their things for purification be given them. And let the maiden which pleaseth the king be queen instead of Vashti. And the thing pleased the king, and he did so. Okay, so prophetically we've seen all the pictures and types. So one thing we see that stands out is the use of virgins in this verse. Okay, we've seen the Gentile queen put aside. Okay, in the time scale of things, the rapture's happened, the bride is gone, the bride of Christ is gone. The opportunity to receive and be part of the bride of Christ is over. That decree has been made. She's put away. It's done. And now what they're seeking is virgins plural. Okay. The church is not virgins plural. The church is one chaste virgin. So the whole body of Christ as a unit is all considered the bride singular of Christ. Not brides plural, and not virgins plural. The virgins plural is a reference to Jews, and it always has been. Matthew 25. Would be the 12? 10. Yes. Mm-hmm. Matthew 25. Yeah. 72, yeah. Who knows? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, my favorite story is that Obama, not Obama, could have been Obama. Osama bin Laden, when they killed him, they dumped him at sea, they say. And so he wakes up after these hit the bottom of the ocean floor, and he looks around, there's all these fish staring at him. He said, 72 sturgeons, not virgins. Finally got clarity on it. Okay, so Matthew 25, verse 1. Then shall the kingdom of heaven be likened to 10 virgins, which took their lamps, and went forth to meet the bridegroom. And 5 of them were wise, and 5 were foolish. They that were foolish took their lamps, and took no oil in them. But the wise took oil in their vessels with their lamps. While the bridegroom tarried, they all slumbered and slept. And at midnight there was a cry made, Behold, the bridegroom cometh. Go ye out and meet him. Then all those virgins arose and trimmed their lamps. And the foolish said unto the wise, Give us of your oil, for our lamps have gone out. But the wise answered, saying, Not so, lest there be not enough for us and you. But go ye rather to them that sell, and buy for yourselves. And while they went to buy, the bridegroom came, and they were not ready. And they that were ready went in with him to the marriage, and the door was shut. Afterward came also other virgins, saying, Lord, Lord, open to us. But he answered and said, Verily I say unto you, I know you not. Watch therefore, for you know neither the day nor the hour when the Son of Man cometh. That's a Jewish rapture. that he's talking about. In the tribulation, he's calling virgins. There's a group of individual virgins that are to be looking for him. He says in Malachi, to them that look for him will he appear the second time with healing in his wings. Malachi 4. Mm-hmm. In Revelation 14. Revelation 14, verse 1. Here we find the virgins in the tribulation. Revelation 14, verse 1. I looked, and lo, a lamb stood on the Mount Sinai, and with him 144,000, having his Father's name written in their foreheads. And I heard a voice from heaven, as the voice of many waters, and as the voice of a great thunder. And I heard the voice of harpers harping with their harps. What else would they be doing with them? and they sung, as it were, a new song before the throne and before the four beasts and the elders. And no man could learn that song but the 144,000 which were redeemed from the earth. These are they which are not defiled with women, for they are virgins. These are they which follow the Lamb whithersoever he goeth. These were redeemed from among men, being the firstfruits unto God and to the Lamb. Okay, so there's these Jews out of the 12 tribes of Israel who are virgins, are chosen by God in the tribulation to go preach, to send the message. So in the tribulation, it's virgins plural he's looking for. All the way through you find virgins as a reference to Israel, the nation. Vashti, the Gentiles, been put away according to the law of the Medes and the Persians. We found that decree in chapter 1, verse 19. Once it's in writing, it's unalterable. It cannot be changed. So after the tribulation, or after the rapture, it's unalterable. It can't be changed. You can't get in the same way. You can't be part of the bride of Christ. It's over. You better get saved now while it's simple. Amen. Once the bride is in, the door is shut, it's over. Then it's a new system in place, and if you've already been given opportunity, you won't have a second one. That's right. So what follows is all that the young virgins here are being called for throughout the land. And this is we don't want to make this pagan king here into a god as though he's righteous, because he's not righteous. He's a heathen. We got to remember that. He's going to do some very cruel and harsh things. We got to keep that in mind. That doesn't mean that God's approving of this. He's a heathen. But even with him being a heathen, God's going to orchestrate events for his people. He's calling for virgins throughout the land. Could you imagine this? Imagine if we were to reenact that today. Trump says, whatever his wife's name, Melania. Melania's dead, or she made him mad. He puts her away. He says, I tell you what, I need a new wife. I want the IRS, the FBI, and the CIA to look throughout this whole land. Let's do a census, find all the pretty young virgins, and bring them to the Capitol on this date. And I'm going to pick them. I'm going to pick which one I like. Now, that's the same thing that's going on here. That sounds pretty wild. But that's the king. They had power.
That would be a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah, not very many nowadays. Yeah. Ester2, verse 5. That's Mordecai's in the same boat. You find his stress in the whole thing. Ester2, verse 5. Now in Shushan the palace there was a certain Jew, whose name was Mordecai, the son of Jar, the son of Shemiel, the son of Kish, a Benjamite. Okay, so he's of a kingly tribe. Even though it was not the chosen line of the scepter, it was still the kingly tribe. That's where Saul came from. Do what? Yep. Saul and Paul. Verse 6. Who had been carried away from Jerusalem with the captivity, which had been carried away with Jeconiah, king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, had carried away. And he brought up Hadassah. I don't know how you say it. There's where it is. You figure it out. That is Esther, his uncle's daughter. For she had neither father nor mother, and the maid was fair and beautiful, whom Mordecai, when her father and mother were dead, took for his own daughter. Okay, so verse 7, we're introduced to Esther, the Jew. Now, her first name that's given, that one that's hard to say, Hadassah. H on the end. Hadassah. That means myrtle. That's her Jewish name. We don't know her by her Jewish name, though. We know her by her pagan name that was given her, Esther. Esther, if you think about it, you'll know what that means. Ishtar, Easter, Osiris, and all those pagan gods, they're all named after something that is a false god. So they change her name to a false god too, and it's Star, morning star. So that's where Easter comes from, Ishtar. Now, myrtle. If they had stuck with myrtle, what do we know about a myrtle tree? Not a whole lot, and I didn't know a whole lot about it either. Isaiah 55, verse 13. Isaiah 55, 13. Man, we're going to be doing good to get a whole chapter in. Isaiah 55, verse 13. I think we'll just have fun with this rather than trying to rush through a whole chapter. Isaiah 55, 13. I know. Instead of a thorn shall come up the fir tree. Okay, so a fir should be just the opposite of a thorn. So there's a whole family of opposite of thorns. You should be opposite of a thorn. A fir, the fir tree. Now, let's keep reading. Instead of the briar shall come up the myrtle tree. So she's just the opposite of a curse. Remember, that was the curse that God put on the ground, was it's going to bring forth briars. Okay? So she's just the opposite of a curse. She's there to give Israel a blessing in her Hebrew name. Now also, the book that has the most mention of the word myrtle is Zechariah. And in that book, it's in chapter 1. Chapter 1 in verse 8, 10, and 11. It's all about end-time prophecies. And you find God there talking to a man who's standing in the myrtle trees, and what do you see, and what's going on down here? And he's all given prophecies of the tribulation and what's going on. So we've been given two things here. We've been given Esther is going to be the blessing for Israel. She's going to be their deliverer. And also, we're going to learn something about end times. And that's all derived from just her name in the Hebrew form. Now, people like to use her name that was given to her, Esther, and say she was a star, and they make a movie star out of her. Okay? Well, I don't think that's the right interpretation on the thing. Because if we go there, before long, we've got to pay homage to the pagan festival of Easter, because that's where it falls in place. So I think the proper emphasis on these two names is her Hebrew name. Now, yes?
Why would they name this book Esther if they knew that?
They didn't. God did. You got to remember a bunch of things. She shouldn't be here.
I know. I'm just saying.
She shouldn't be here.
The book. Why did they name the book?
Because they're all heathen. Even though they're Jews, they're out of God's will. They shouldn't be here. They should be in the land. Cyrus gave them a decree. Head back. They said, no, we got it comfortable right here. everybody in this book is staying in a place they had no business being. So yeah, she's adopted the heathen. She's called them her friends and family and home. So, you want to act like a heathen, God will consider you one. Now, that's not the end of the story. There's going to be redemption in it. Okay, but her Persian name means star. That's the heathen influence of it. Mordecai was Esther's cousin, and he raises her as his own daughter. So he cares for her. And you get the idea from reading this story that he has the same maternal, paternal instincts for her. When she's called away, he's going to go stalk her. He is. He's going to walk by the palace, and he obviously has the right to be out that way, and he's keeping an eye on things and keeping an ear to the ground to make sure he doesn't need to call in SEAL Team 6. Yeah, that's right. Esther 2, verse 8. So it came to pass, when the king's commandment and his decree was heard, and when many maidens were gathered together to Shushan the palace, to the custody of, now see the name has changed, Haggai, that Esther was brought also unto the king's house, to the custody of Haggai, that, keeper of the women. And the maiden pleased him, and she obtained kindness of him, and he speedily gave her things for purification. Now there it's saying this Haggai, or however you say the name, is male, is the way I'm reading it. It's a he. So it probably is a eunuch. Gave her things for her purification, with such things as belonged to her, and 7 maidens, which were meet to be given her out of the king's house, and he preferred her and her maidens unto the best place of the house of the women. Okay, so she's getting the special treatment here. And there's no real reason other than God. Of everybody in the land, and it just happens to be she's chosen, a Jew? No, God's behind that. And unless God moves, our chances are about as good as winning the lottery in this world. God's got to be behind it. God was also behind the 3 Hebrew children and Daniel. Remember, they say, hey, look, God's not giving me peace about eating that garbage you're serving everybody else. We've got rules. You know, we don't eat bloody stuff, and we don't eat unpurified meat, and we don't, it's got to be kosher, and we're not going to touch it. Why don't you just give us some bread and water and see what we do with that? And he said, no, you don't understand. The king is looking for warriors and somebody that represents him, and if you show up there and your mind's about half shot because you hadn't had any meat, I'm going to be on the chopping block. But God does something. He gives Daniel and his crew favor. And that's what Esther got. He got favor. In this life, God can give favor to his kids, his children, in situations they shouldn't normally have favor. I've seen it in my life many times. Situations that, they should have said, okay, you're done. That's it. But I've been given special treatment. And that's God. That's God's hand. That's favor. When God sent the Jews into captivity, he didn't desert them. These people should have gone back, but they're being rebellious. And he still didn't desert them. God's good even to the rebels. Amen. He is. This whole book is about God's mercy, because he didn't have to be merciful to these people, and he didn't have to be merciful to Esther, but he was, even though they were where they shouldn't have been. This is how much he cares. Later on in our story, we'll see Haman show up, and he wants to wipe out every Jew on the face of the earth. Well, God's given favor where favor needs to be given. And that's the theme, or a major theme of this book, is what happens when God decides I'm going to put some favor right here. Even against human reason, God's favor means something's got to happen the right way.
That's where Mossad comes in, right?
Yeah, Mossad. Ecclesiastes chapter 7. Ecclesiastes 7, verse 21. Verse 28. Ecclesiastes 7:28. This is supposedly the wisest man. He was the wisest man. Now, I wouldn't say that he kept his wisdom, that he retained his wisdom all his life. But he was the wisest man that lived. And he said, I'm going to look for the best woman I can find. You know, kind of like our story in Esther. He went out looking for a perfect woman out of everybody in the land. Here's our verse. Ecclesiastes 7:28. Which yet my soul seeketh, but I find not. One man among 1,000 have I found. Solomon said, I could find one man amongst 1,000 that would be okay. That's the odds. But read it. But a woman among all those have I not found. And he had 1,000. And he said, none of them are worth anything. Wow. All of them had problems.
That's his poor choice of language.
Well, you can decide whether his wisdom had left him at that point or
Pharaoh's daughter.
yeah. Yeah.
Downhill.
Yep.
Downhill.
But that's showing you God can decide when one's going to get the favor. And it was Esther. And she wasn't really part of the crew that came in. They were all heathens. She really was something different. And she's going to end up telling them in a minute. Well, not this time, but in a few weeks. The chief of the eunuchs looks at her. And obviously she's a poor girl. She's a transplant. She doesn't have everything she needs for her purification. So what's he do? Remember, she's got favor? He gives her 7 maids. He said, looks like you need some work, woman. Let's go find 7 maids, 7 servants for you. You know, the one that had been enslaved? Israel had been captured and enslaved. He said, no, let's find some slaves for you. So now she's got 7 women taking care of her. And said, we've got some really good perfumes that you might ought to get a few of those, so let's throw some perfume in there too. So she's getting pampered. She's getting everything a woman would want. I don't know what those things are, but women know. Yeah, she's at the spa. But it's a perpetual thing. In a minute we're going to find out how long. She gets the top spot in the harem. Now that's a rough way to put it, but that's what it is. Our verse said the best place of the house of the women. So in the place where his women are, she's got the best spot in the land. She's got the best of the best. God's positioning Esther to be queen of everything. Remember? His territory runs from India to Ethiopia. He's covering every known piece of ground they had. So, all of this was done in order that Esther could help her people, the Jews. That's all the reason behind it, is these Jews need help, and they need to get somebody in a high position that's going to protect them. And so God dumps out favor on one person. Ester2, verse 10. Esther had not shown her people nor her kindred, for Mordecai had charged her that she should not show it. I don't know what the wisdom in that was, but he thought there was something about it that she should not be telling anybody she was a Jew. Now this is before he's so hated. Soon he's going to be so hated that he's going to cause almost, Hitler to show up. But at the time, that hadn't happened yet. So he knows there's some kind of undercurrent going on that, hey, these Jews are second class, they're worthless, we don't want to have anything to do with them. So he's telling her, hey, don't let anybody know you're a Jew. As far as they know, you're just one of the people. Verse 11. And Mordecai walked every day before the court of the women's house to know how Esther did and what should become of her. Okay, I guess I would too. He's raised this girl as his own daughter. Now she's taken from him, and he knows where she is, but he can't go in there and get her. He can give her a little bit of advice as she walks off. He says, hey, look, don't tell anybody you're a Jew. But now he's keeping an eye on things. I call this his stalking. He's a stalker. Esther's hiding the fact that she's a Jew because she had reverence and respect for the man who had raised her, Mordecai. In Esther 2, verse 20, it said, Esther had not yet shown her kindred nor her people, as Mordecai had charged her. For Esther did the commandment of Mordecai, like as when she was brought up with him. Okay, so as a child, he raised her as his daughter. As a child, she knew when he said, don't touch the stove, that meant don't touch the stove. And she learned to obey. And there's a certain tone of voice that a parent gets that says, I'm not going to explain it to you. You don't need to know. You better obey. And it clicks. There's just a certain part of the brain that turns on that says, obey or it's going to be painful. That's what's going on here. He got the parent tone of voice with her and he said, don't tell anybody you're a Jew. And so that's where she is at this point. Mordecai obviously has some position of authority in our story. He's not a nobody because he's got access to the lady's house. He can walk by it. Now that would not be public domain for just anybody to walk up to. They're secluded. And you've got to show some credentials and be somebody to be in that area. So obviously he was of enough rank in authority in the kingdom that he had access. He sat at the king's gate, it says in verse 19. That's where the people that make decisions sit. So he had some authority. In Deuteronomy 16:18, he says, and judges and officers shalt thou make thee in all thy gates. The gates is where they do business, which the Lord thy God giveth thee throughout thy tribes, and they shall judge the people with just judgment. So the gate is the place of business. It's like the courthouse. It's the place that they decide arguments and they give out judgment. So you've got to be like the Supreme Court is right there, and they're making decisions and that type of thing.
Isn't that what Absalom did to take the
Yeah, he did. Mm-hmm. In Ruth chapter 4, verse 1, we find the same thing with this gate. Then went Boaz up to the gate and sat him down there, and behold, the kinsman of Boaz spake, so forth, so on. That's where that exchange takes place, where he offers to give Ruth to the nearest kinsman. He says, I'm not the nearest one, but according to the law, here's what can be. Okay, that's a law thing. It's a legal deal that's being settled there in the gate. So, obviously, Mordecai's got access to the gate. And so he's not a nobody. He's somebody. In Esther 6, verse 4. Esther 6, verse 4. There's a reason they're in the gate. The gate is obviously not necessarily the gate to the city, although sometimes it is the gate to the city. But it's probably a gate that's near the palace, and that's the place of business. And it's near enough that the king probably has earshot of it. He can overhear when they're making a deal out there, and he decides, I don't like that, how that's going down. Somebody go out there and tell them they ain't doing that. That's the way those kings were. Esther 6, verse 4. And the king said, who is in the court? Now Haman was come into the outer court in the king's house to speak unto the king to hang Mordecai on the gallows that he'd prepared for him. And the king's servant said unto him, behold, Haman standeth in the court. And the king said, let him come in. Okay, so it's close enough in proximity that the king can send somebody, hey, I need somebody to go do some business. Give me something. Somebody, don't just pull somebody off the street. I want somebody that I can trust, so pick one of them out of the gate. So that's where Mordecai is. His position is a bigwig as far as the government is concerned. Esther 2, verse 12. Esther 2, verse 12. Now when every maid's term was come to go in unto King Ahasuerus, after that she had been 12 months according to the manner of the women, for so were the days of their purification accomplished, to wit 6 months with oil of myrrh, 6 months with sweet odors, and with other things for purification of the women. We'll come back to that in a minute. Verse 30. Then thus came every maiden unto the king. Whatsoever she desired was given her to go with her out of the house of the women unto the king's house. In the evening she went, and on the morrow she returned unto the second house of the women, and to the custody of that woman, man, whatever it is, Shashgaz, the king, the king, the king's chamberlain, which kept the concubines. She came in to the king no more, except the king delighted in her, and that she were called by name. So the young ladies had to be purified for a whole year. That is a long time. Here's the problem. The problem is the woman is not considered clean until she's married. Before marriage, she's unclean. It took them a year to get her clean. That's a long wait. Yeah. Imagine what that did for the equal rights, the ERA at the time. 12 months, that was a long time. Verse 14 shows you how this king operates. Now, he is a heathen. There's no way around that. And he's got him a harem here, and they each get a night with the king. The Bible is not condoning that. The Bible's not saying that's good. It's showing you what heathen kings do. And that's the world. You get away from a country that's been away from the Bible or from God, and you get close to that kind of mess. All the Middle Eastern Muslim countries, it's like that.
Does that mean he took their virginity every
Yes.
single one of them? Yes. Oh no, I didn't know that.
Yes.
And then he put them in the penthouse because they had already been there.
Yes. And then they'll live the rest of their days in virginity, even though they lost it. But according to God, he considers them still a virgin. But if she was chosen, she was released to go and lead an ordinary life. If she's not chosen, it's almost like they're put in jail because they didn't qualify.
They don't get to marry anybody.
Yeah.
And have children of their own.
No normal life.
Yeah.
It was a harsh society. Yeah. So the Bible doesn't cover up any gory details. It lays it all out there, shows you what the heathen are like. Just because this is going to end up being a good story for God's people doesn't mean God's going to whitewash it. He's going to tell you how the heathen are, and this is how they are, and it took the orchestration of God's favor to make a difference. Esther 2, verse 15. Now, when the turn of Esther, the daughter of Abihail, the uncle of Mordecai, who had taken her for his daughter, was come to go into the king, she required nothing but what Haggai, the king's chamberlain, the keeper of the women, appointed. And Esther obtained favor. That's a good thing in the sight of all them that looked upon her. So Esther was taken the 10th month, which is the month Tebeth. Tebeth? That month. In the 7th year of his reign. Okay, now we know that that's going to mean something. We'll cover that again in a minute, but note the timing there. Verse 17. And the king loved Esther above all the women, and she obtained grace and favor in his sight more than all the virgins. So, now that we got to continue our picture. There's a time that somebody is considered better than everybody else. Right now, the church age, God's considering us better than the Jew. But soon that's going to flop. And the Jew's going to be considered better than everybody else. That's right here. She's been given favor, and she's considered better than everybody else. Verse 18. Then the king made a great feast unto all his princes and his servants, even Esther's feast. And he made a release to the provinces and gave gifts according to the state of the king. This is a big affair going on right here. They're having a party. He made a release. That means everybody is on holiday. No work done. And then he says, let's all just send some gifts around. Have we ever seen a holiday like that? According to the state of the king. Now, it's going to line up in a minute, but we got to keep reading. Verse 19. And when the virgins were gathered together the second time, then Mordecai sat in the king's gate. Esther had not yet showed her kindred nor people, as Mordecai had charged her, for Esther did the commandment of Mordecai as when she was brought up with him. God's working in Esther's surroundings. He's orchestrating things so that she's going to be chosen, she's going to be picked as number one. It's so much favor is given to her that the king doesn't just say, I like Esther, that's the one. Let's go on with life. He says, I like her so much, we're going to declare a national holiday, and we're going to call it Esther Day. That's what he did. He declared a holiday on her day in her name. Now, he told us what day that happens. There's going to be a bunch of things here. I want to make sure I get them, don't get them out of order. Okay. What month did he say it was?
10th month.
The 10th month. Okay. So, what month is that?
That means she didn't fulfill her full year either. December and January. Maybe not.
I don't. Well, I don't know when she started.
Yeah, that's how
Yeah.
you say.
Right. So the 10th month is what month?
January,
December. Deca. That's 10. Yeah, it can be either, but it's probably just the way our calendar has things set up. October means what? What's an octagon? 8. Deca is what? A decimal system is 10.
How come December is our 12th month?
Right. Exactly.
Why is it our 12th month?
Exactly.
That means 10.
Because they threw the April Fool on the wrong spot.
Oh, yeah.
April should have been number 1.
Easter is on April Fool's Day this week.
Right.
Really?
That
Wow.
was me.
How ironic.
So in December, the 10th month of December, which is our December, what are you counting?
April, May, June, July, August. April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December. That's 9 months.
What are you counting?
If we made April our first month.
April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December. Yeah. Well, their month is a lunar month. It's not and it's a 30-day month. It's not a 31, 32-day month. It's, in fact, you'll find there's a time of the year they get an extra month. They'll have 13 months in the year, not 12. That is, they're supposed to go out, we're veered way off, but that's okay. They're supposed to go out at harvest, And based on the moon and based on the rain, they know whether or not they're going to have a repeat of the last month. God set that up. So there's no way for us to go back and recalculate as though we were a Jew, because we don't have the timetable. We don't know what month it rained and what month it didn't, and when they saw the moon and when they didn't. So God had it fixed. He was controlling the calendar for them. So this is probably in December. And it's probably just like what we do in December. We give gifts and declare a national holiday. That's exactly what they did. Now, there's a reason for this. It's going to picture a tribulation rapture. This is when the Jew is chosen to go to the king's house. Okay, there's going to be a time in the tribulation that the Jew is chosen and she'll go to the king's house. She's chosen among the virgins, plural. Some of the virgins are wise and some of them are foolish, remember? The ones who are wise get to go. The ones who are foolish have to stay. So that's probably what we have here. And we know that happened. There's something that happens in Christmas time in the tribulation. You remember that? Let's find it. Revelation 11. Yeah. Revelation 11. Revelation 11, verse 10. And they that dwell upon the earth shall rejoice over them, and make merry, and shall send gifts one to another, because these two prophets tormented them that dwelt upon the earth. Okay, so what do you see there? You see, there's the very same thing. They're having a Christmas party. Now, why are they doing that? Because verse 6. These have power to shut heaven, that it rain not in the days of their prophecy, and have power over waters, to turn them blood, and to smite the earth with all plagues as oft as they will. And when they shall have finished their testimony, the beast that ascendeth out of the bottomless pit shall make war against them, and shall overcome them, and kill them. And their dead bodies shall lie in the street of the great city, which is spiritually called Sodom and Egypt, where our Lord was crucified. And they of the people of the kindreds and tongues and nations shall see their dead bodies 3 days and a half, and shall not suffer their dead bodies to be put in graves. Okay, there's where it is. Moses and Elijah, the two witnesses, are killed after prophesying 42 months, 3.5 years. And their bodies are going to lay in the street for 3.5 days. At some point during that 3.5 days, maybe at the beginning, maybe at the end, but Christmas falls and they all send gifts. And they all hoop and holler, and the main attraction on the TV set is a live cam on the dead bodies in the street. Yeah, that's what's going on. And the dead bodies make a movie they didn't expect to happen.
Yeah.
They jump up and say, "Hey, oh, I lost my head. Let me grab that." I thought I had a headache. So that's the picture here. The picture is something that's going to happen in the tribulation. And he's given you the timing for it. And he gives us the timing so close, it's 3.5 days to within probably what's going on here. Okay, let's see if there's anything else in here. Oh, yeah, you can see there's two. I don't have time to get into all that information. There's two tribulations in the rapture. And so the virgins, you see there's two groups of virgins. There's wise virgins and there's foolish virgins. There's a reason for that. I'm not saying the foolish virgins are done away with. They get a second chance. Remember, the wise virgins gave good advice to the foolish virgins. They said, "Hey, you better go buy some Holy Spirit." They said, "Find somebody that's selling oil." Well, if you're going to sell it, that's works. You had to work to get some money to pay for it. We don't pay for salvation now, and we don't work for it. But one day somebody's going to. Okay, so the stupid virgins, the foolish virgins. They could do something to redeem themselves. And there's going to be a second appearance. At the end of the tribulation, there's going to be a second rapture. And if they've done right after getting the wake-up call from not being able to go up the first time around, then they could have redeemed themselves and go up in the second one. That's to them that look for him will appear the second time. Okay, Esther chapter 2. What time have we gotten to? Better stop it there. Esther, we'll pick up at Esther 2, verse 21 when we come back the next time around. I thought we went a little far off base to finish this whole chapter, but
So actually, we covered good stuff.
yeah.